There we are on the launch pad. I think this is a picture on the 4th of July, or one of our 3 launch attempts, but I think we'll actually launch this time. Vehicle's all fueled up and ready to go. We start getting ready about 3.5 hours prior to launch. About 2.5 hours prior, we're walking out. We're carrying American flags for the 4th of July, except for Thomas Ryder in the back, who's German. He's carrying a German flag. I don't know if it's a German 4th of July or not. So we walk into this, the vehicle. We head out to the pad. This is the Launch Control Center, and those folks are getting ready to launch us. They're controlling the vehicle. And we finally get the go, light up the main engines. They'll run for about 6 seconds. We'll make sure they're working okay. And then we're off for quite a ride here in just a few seconds. Here's a shot from the vehicle with all the cameras we had on board. And that's your view if you're on a solid rocket booster. Fortunately, none of us were there. It was a beautiful day on the 4th of July. We roll, and we're going to head out over the Atlantic Ocean as we accelerate. And there's a view up in the upper right of Mark, Lisa, and Mike on the flight deck, bouncing around a little bit. Pretty good acceleration. You're really getting kicked back in your seats. And you can see the coastline of Florida slowly going away as we climb up. And it was one of those no-wind days where the plume just kind of stayed in place. And so we're going to ride these solid rocket boosters. Those are the white things on the side for about 2 minutes, and it'll take us up to about 4,000 miles an hour, about 150,000 feet. You can see the shadow in the top of the picture, which is the plume. And there's kind of a close-in view as we're accelerating up and getting further and further away and lower on the horizon for those of you that were watching the launch. About 2 minutes, the solid rocket boosters are out of propellant, and they're going to pop off here in a minute. You can see they're bouncing around still, but it'll start to smooth out as we run out of propellant and then continue our way up. And you can see the tail off, and there they go. And there's a good shot as the shuttle goes away. Spectacular shot from the solid rocket booster camera. We see a little handshake there. That's at 50 miles, and that's what we call you an astronaut when you reach 50 miles high. 8.5 minutes later, we reached 17,500 miles an hour, and we were in orbit.
So that was a very busy flight day 1, but there was no time to rest. Flight day 2, we started our inspections. We had a lot of those to do. We had the new 50-foot boom on there. Here's a computer simulations of what that looked like from the outside. And you can see we're looking all over the leading edges and underside and all the places that we might have damage. So here's some of the view of the real imagery that we got and send that down. We also did some looking with the end effector camera. You can see there's some of the jets, and you also see some tiles, and all this went down. Here's a look at the upper part of the crew cabin. All this went down. The imagery team did a great job analyzing it and sending us data and let us know that our vehicle looked really clean.
So the space shuttle after launch is going 17,500 miles an hour, and so is the space station. Problem is they're really not anywhere near each other. So over 3 days we start to catch up, and eventually we get underneath the space station about 600 miles, directly underneath it. And at that point we have to do this pitch maneuver. The reason we do this is so the space station crew could take some pictures of the bottom side of Discovery. So this is now us upside down, can't see anything, and we're kind of doing this in the blind, but we have some pretty good expectations of what's going to happen. Eventually we flip all the way over, and now our nose is about pointed towards the ground. If you probably guess this is sped up a little, and it is, I think, by about 10 times. When we saw the space station coming over the tail, we were all pretty happy about that, because you like to see it show up where you expect. It would be bad if it was in a different place. And this is Pavel and Jeff talking about what they saw right before we docked. We eventually get in front of the space station, and we slowly approach it. And initially, it's flown by the computers, but later as we get closer, Steve will manually fly the docking by looking out the window and looking through some cameras. And that's a space station on top and the space shuttle on the bottom. And they come together at about 1/10 of a foot per second. So pretty slow. That's sped up there a little bit too. Not all that much. And then we'll bring those two surfaces together and pressurize the vacuum that's between the two vehicles. And well, these guys were happy we didn't hit too hard. They're also looking forward to seeing some new faces. I think they were getting sick of each other by then. So this is us coming in into the U.S. laboratory for the first time. Jeff is there on the right and Pavel was on the left, and we all kind of funnel in.
One of the first things we did was take a good look at this new place, starting off on the flight deck of the orbiter, going heads down the ladder, because we can. Kind of spin around, quick shot through the middeck, and then going out into the external airlock, kind of flip around, and then go up through the pressurized, or through the docking mechanism, through the pressurized mating adapter, and we're looking at the station typically upside down, so you have to do another roll. It got busy right away with a lot of people doing different kinds of work in there. We're not going to take all of the possible turns. Heading into the node here, Thomas didn't take long to find the computer, going through another pressurized mating adapter. You see how the crew had everything pre-packed and ready for us. It was just awesome. They did a lot. Heading here into the FGB, it's all food stacked against the floor there, or is it the ceiling? Or, no, it's the floor. Heading down through the FGB toward the aft end, kind of looking across here, we can begin to see into the service module. Oh yeah, I have to do one more roll. And now we're in the service module with Pavel working down at this end.
And then we begin our flight day 4. This was our MPLM unberth and install. This is Lisa and I, the robotics workstation, on the space station in the laboratory. And we're maneuvering the station arm in to grapple the multi-purpose logistics module that's in the shuttle payload bay. Houses all of our cargo. This is a shot inside again of Lisa and I with the station crew, Jeff and Pavel, at the robotics workstation. We're maneuvering the logistics module up out of the shuttle payload bay to install it on the node nadir port on the station. We install it and then ungrapple and maneuver the shuttle arm, the station arm away, for that operation.
Next, on day 5, we started the EVAs. That's me on the right exercising, wearing an oxygen mask clamped to my head. That's to get the start getting nitrogen out. Once we go through that pre-breathe exercise protocol, we start getting suited up. You see us in our liquid cooling garments here, and then we get stuffed into the suits and get set. Piers is free in the middle of the airlock as they start to stuff him into the crew lock. He's in there now. They've added some bags and trying to wedge me in. Once we get in, depressurize that outer portion, pop open the internal hatch and the outer thermal cover you see flapping there, and it's time for Piers to slide outside. We're on the lower left of this. We've started working on the station, picked up a bunch of equipment, and working our way into the payload bay of the shuttle where you see us here. That's Piers's feet near the center of the screen, carrying a large foot restraint and a tool stanchion we affectionately called the hat rack. Pretty big piece of equipment to be hauling around. We set that up on the boom, which was on the arm. This is a computer simulation here that shows the two of us on it. All told, that's 100 foot of arm and boom. Piers went out solo first for some tests, and then the two of us went out to do, first we affectionately called it bouncing on the boom. Here's a view from Piers's helmet, kind of looking back at the orbiter. It gives you an idea of what kind of a spectacular view you have. It got a little distracting at times. So we did some work in free space on the boom to see how to do some tests, and then they pushed us in close to structure. And this simulation shows me actually in contact with the end of the truss, and I'm simulating different types of activities as if it was a repair, to see if the boom and the arm could hold us stable enough to do a repair. Once we completed that, it's a long, slow, dark ride back toward the payload bay. And it does get cold out there, especially when it's night and you cannot see anything made by man. A little lonely, too. Get down close to the payload bay, and there we started to pull all of the gear off and get cleaned up to head back toward the airlock. We've put all the toys away. Piers is inside and pulls the thermal cover shut. Gee, that went fast. That was 7.5 hours later. That's the end of EVA 1. Occasionally we had the chance to look out the window. You see the Nile River snaking across toward the left, the Mediterranean Sea, the Nile Delta, and the Red Sea at the top.
And this is the beginning of our flight day 6. This was a big transfer day for us. Here I was inside the multipurpose logistics module, and I'm there with Steve. Basically, we unload the old items, or the new items for return, and load on the old items. And we worked very, very hard, many, many hours. At least that's what the ground thought, but we were really inside the logistics module doing cute astronaut tricks. But here's a shot of a zero-gravity stowage rack being transferred. It's a soft rack, and it houses the supplies inside. It takes a couple of people to transfer through the hatchway, and that's a crew transfer bag. We bring supplies from the shuttle also to the airlock and into the lab. And this is the beginning of EVA 2. This is Lisa and I at the robotics workstation, beginning the preparations for the robotics apps to support that EVA.
Yep, another day, another EVA. First thing we had to do was to pick up this big pump module. It's about 1,400 pounds. And Mike and I lift it up in the back of the shuttle. And ladies get the end effector and grab it out of our hands and swing it over to the space station, where they park it on a special storage shelf outside the airlock for use as a spare later on. And then after that, we got to wrestle with the dreaded TUS. But before that happened, we had this spectacular sunrise. See how the whole world goes pink, and then copper, and then white in just a few seconds when you're outside. It's really quite the most beautiful thing. See the colors changing. Okay, back to the TUS. Oh, here's me trying to find the TUS. Life is very close up and personal when you're translating around on the outside of a spacecraft. You tend to concentrate on where you're putting your hands. It's quite easy, though, when you get the hang of it. Mike is on the arm here, and he's grabbing the old TUS, which is about the size of a baby grand piano, and we take it down to the shuttle payload bay, where he hands it off to me. I'm just standing around holding this thing. Then he grabs the new one and swings back to the space station to install it. I won't tell you all the adventures we had with this, but all the bolts stuck, and we had various problems with tools and things. Very exciting. Here's me trying to hammer the old TUS back into place in the shuttle, while Mike is using violence and bad language to try and get the other TUS into the truss. There he is. He's swinging it in place. Eventually it all worked out, and we got it in there. Some tight moments. This is a close-up of a pistol grip tool, which is just electric bolt driver. It's pretty cool. You can set the amount you want to tighten up the bolt, the torque regulator, and then just crank up your bolts with this. And it works most of the time. There you are, spinning up a bolt. If you didn't have one of these, your hands would get very, very tired, even if you're as tough as Mike. And here's a nice view, a little scenic view that you occasionally manage to get out of the corner of your eye. Between EVAs, Mike and I have got to go and gas up our suits. You've got to change all the batteries, fill them with oxygen, resupply the water, change all the little batteries that are associated with the power. Here's a nice picture of some Russian equipment, followed by cloudscapes over the South Pacific. And then it's time for science. These guys are playing water polo, a variant. And this is cool. This is a bubble of water with a bubble of air in the middle, which makes a pretty good lens, which basically makes you look normal, mate, compared to other people. The cool thing is you can drink the water out of the air. Lisa has a very dignified, well-regulated approach to this particular trick. You know, she takes her time, she chases the last one, she gets it all sorted out. The other guys were really trying to help me out a lot here. I got to do this. And end up in insane rodent mode. Steph likes to turn her food as she eats it. She's just like an anaconda. And, Mike has a future in ballet. Just beautiful. Down to the Russian bar and grill in the service module for something to eat. It's very nice down there. It's very homely. They have a table, so we can all sit around there and have dinner. Trying the Russian lamb and potatoes and onions. Tuesday nights is karaoke night down there. And That's right. See, Mikey's helped me out there, approving. And it's EVA 3.
So how do you follow that up? I think I'll just sit here and be quiet. This is EVA 3. So our first EVA was all about the boom. Second EVA was about moving some, fixing some stuff on the outside of the space station and putting some spare parts out there. And the third EVA was about doing this big, pretty important experiment, very important experiment. It was very successful. And what this experiment was about was to see if we could fix the heat shield on the leading edge of the orbiter, the reinforced carbon-carbon. So we had a bunch of tools to do that, a bunch of bags with a bunch of tools in it, and we had this really big box all the way in the back of the payload bay. And here you can see what one of the bags of tools look like. There's really a lot of stuff in there, and most of it is tied down or kept in place. And then we have some samples, and on these samples, this is pieces of wing essentially, and a putty knife and some putty. And this putty is called Nowak's, and it's pretty good at absorbing heat and actually dissipating heat. What was that, Mike? This is the EVA IR camera, which we tested outside as well, and I think this is Piers here, so you can see some of the joints on his spacesuit where heat's coming out of. This EVA lasted about 7 hours, and just last week we tested these samples, and they work great.
And this is the day that we demated the multipurpose logistics module. Here's a view moving away from the node. The logistics module, after having transferred 5,000 pounds of cargo, and there's a shot of the petals closing. With the space station arm, we maneuver the logistics module down into the payload bay and berth it for return home with all of the return items. And prior to flight, Lisa and I were dubbed the Robo Chicks, and Piers was kind enough to do some space art for us, so we decided to show it off.
Well, we had a great time, but then it's time to go. So here's some farewells. Everyone saying goodbye. And, you know, we think they were really glad to see us when we got there. And then we think that they were really glad to see us go. We kept everybody really busy. And I think Jeff said the night after we left, he got about 12 hours of sleep. So it's time to shut the hatches. You can see some of that operation going on here. Got to get everything sealed up just right. And no time to rest. We're busy, and it's time to do the undock. You can see inside, just like on the rendezvous, it's pretty crowded. Mark is at the controls now. You can see just behind his head, you can see the actual beginning of the undock taking place. And there it is from the outside. So we're watching out those overhead windows, and Mark at the controls. See again on the inside, of course, there's lots of people taking pictures. We had all of us in there. You can't see me. I'm kind of buried down in the right corner down below, working on some computer systems. You'll see the nose jets firing. There they go. And there's the station. We're moving away from it. And throughout the rest of the day, we kept busy doing a lot of things, starting to get ready to come home. And you could still look out the window and see the station getting farther and farther away. And we had lots of things to put away, all the things we had gotten out during the mission, all those EVA things, and a lot of the transfer items. A lot of things still need to be put away, so we kept busy doing that for the next day until it's getting ready, time to come home.
Day before, you know, we have to land the vehicle, so we have this computer program called Pilot, and it's just a video game, kids. So that's all I'm doing is a video game, and highly paid just to play this game. And so practice the game, and then the time for deorbit, and we get back in our orange pressure suits, and there's Piers trying to get me in. I think I've had my G-suit on backwards. He had to fix me. Then Piers getting in while we're up on the flight deck, getting ready to go. And we'll start our approach about 9,000 miles away from where we're going to land. This is a shot from a minicam on the flight deck. You see the little flash out the overhead windows in the upper left of your screen, and that's plasma flashes as the atmosphere around us is basically on fire because of the heat. There's the view out the front. You can see the glow. If you go about 4 to 10 feet in front, temperatures all the way up to as hot as 10,000 degrees out there. But that's what your shields are designed to protect us from. And here we are coming into entry, and about 50,000 feet I'll take over manually to fly the vehicle. And this is looking out the heads-up display out the front, what Mark and I are looking at. You can see the runway out there. We'll come in a steep dive, and at about 300 feet here, Mark's going to drop the gear. And the goal is to land this at about 210 miles an hour, about 2,500 feet down the runway, and hopefully land like an airliner and not hurt anybody or hurt the wheels when I land. So coming for a landing. I did land at KSC for the 4th time, so that I was 1 out of 2, and came in and land. And there's the wheels touching down right about there. And then next thing we do is Mark deploys a drag chute, and that just slows us down a little bit, and we'll lower the nose to the runway, get on the brakes to slow us down, and come to a stop after was about 12 days, 18 hours, about 13-day mission. There we are rolling to a stop, and on another nice morning at Kennedy Space Center. And after we get stopped, we'll have about another hour of work to do inside the vehicle, do some more switches and some more work, make sure the vehicle is safe, and then the ground crew approaches us, and eventually we get off the vehicle, and there we are at the end, a very happy and very exhausted crew. Good acceleration, you're really getting kicked back in your seats, and you can see the coastline of Florida slowly going away as we climb up. And it was one of those no-wind days where the plume just kind of stayed in place. And so we're going to ride these solid rocket boosters, those are the white things on the side, for about 2 minutes, and it'll take us up to about 4,000 miles an hour, about 150,000 feet. You can see the shadow in the top of the picture, which is here in just a few seconds. Here's a shot from the vehicle with all the cameras we had on board, and that's your view if you're on a solid rocket booster. Fortunately, none of us were there. It was a beautiful day on the 4th of July. We roll, and we're going to head out over the Atlantic Ocean as we accelerate. And there's a view up in the upper right of Mark, Lisa, and Mike on the flight deck, bouncing around a little bit. Pretty is the plume. And there's kind of a close-in view as we're accelerating up, and getting further and further away, and lower on the horizon for those of you that were watching the launch. About 2 minutes, the solid rocket boosters are out of propellant, and they're going to pop off here in a minute. You can see they're bouncing around still, but it'll start to smooth out as we run out of propellant and then continue our way up. American flags for the 4th of July, except for Thomas Reiter in the back, who's German. He's carrying a German flag. I don't know if it's a German 4th of July or not. So we walk into this the vehicle, we head out to the pad. This is the Launch Control Center, and those folks are getting ready to launch us. They're controlling the vehicle. And we finally get the go, light up the main engines. They'll run for about 6 seconds. We'll make sure they're working okay, and then we're off for quite a ride. There we are on the launch pad. I think this is a picture on the 4th of July, or one of our 3 launch attempts, but I think we'll actually launch this time. Vehicle's all fueled up and ready to go. We started getting ready about 3.5 hours prior to launch. About 2.5 hours prior, we're walking out. We're carrying an American